I never imagined that cruelty could become so routine in my own family. It crept in quietly, disguised as jokes, shrugs, and silences, until one day it revealed itself fully. It happened over something as ordinary as a bowl of soup. One moment I was sitting at the dinner table, trying to be part of the evening. The next, hot liquid splashed into my lap, burning through the fabric. And my grandson was laughing. No one said a word. No one reached out. In that stillness, everything shattered. "Oops," he giggled, slapping his hand over his mouth. The table didn't flinch. My son didn't stand, didn't rush to help. He barely glanced up. "He's just being silly," he said with a shrug, then speared another bite of roast chicken. My daughter-in-law didn't look at me at all. She was cutting her salmon into tiny, perfect pieces, eyes locked on her plate like I didn't exist. And maybe, to them, I didn't anymore. I sat there, the heat biting through my skirt, cheeks burning in shame more than pain. I reached for a napkin, trembling, but it was already stained with gravy. No one offered a towel. No one even offered a glance. That house? I paid off the mortgage. My husband and I built that kitchen together with our own hands. I held babies in that living room, rocked them to sleep while their parents were too tired or too busy. And now I was nothing more than an afterthought, a stain on their upholstery, an inconvenience they tolerated because it was cheaper than putting me somewhere else. I stood slowly, the chair scraping loud against the hardwood, but no one looked up. Not even him. The boy I once carried on my back through a rainstorm so he wouldn't ruin his little red sneakers. Not even him. In my room, I closed the door softly. I didn't slam it. I wasn't raised like that. Raised to be quiet. Raised to be useful. Raised to swallow the bad moments like bitter pills and move on. But this one stuck. This one lodged somewhere deep, refusing to dissolve. I unzipped my skirt and peeled the damp fabric from my thighs, wincing as I dabbed the skin with a wet cloth. I sat on the edge of my bed, my room, their house, and looked around at the four walls that once felt like home. Now they felt like a box I had been filed into, labeled elderly, burden, irrelevant. I didn't cry. I just sat there, thinking about how many times I had turned the other cheek, how many tiny humiliations I'd endured, being left behind during family trips, hearing them whisper that I forgot things, pretending not to hear when they laughed about my stories. That soup wasn't an accident. Maybe it wasn't poured with malice, but it was allowed. And the silence afterward? That was their answer. That was their verdict. And you know what broke me? It wasn't the heat. It wasn't even the dismissiveness. It was the look in my grandson's eyes. That little flash of amusement. Like I was the punchline to a joke he was just now understanding. I had spent years shrinking myself to make room for everyone else in that house, folding my opinions, my traditions, even my recipes into smaller and smaller pieces until they barely tasted like me. And all for what? So I could sit there, humiliated in a home I paid for, ignored by the very people I loved more than myself? No. That was the last time I would sit still and accept scraps in the name of love. Because love without respect, that's just dependency. And I wasn't dependent. I was just tired. Tired of waiting for them to remember who I used to be. Tired of hoping for warmth in a house that went cold the day my husband died. They loved my money more than they ever loved me. And they were about to learn what happens when quiet doesn't mean weak. Later that night, I sat alone in my room, legs aching from the burns, though they were more pink than blistered. I'd used the old first aid kit tucked away in my dresser, the same one I'd stocked after Clifford passed, just in case. The antiseptic stung, but not as much as the memory. Nobody knocked on my door to check on me. Not my son, not my grandson, not the woman who insisted I get more rest anytime I tried to help with chores. I turned on the fan to cut the silence, but all it did was scatter the sounds of laughter from the living room. Them, out there, carrying on like I was nothing but an echo down the hall. I laid back in bed and stared at the ceiling fan as it rotated, slow and tired, just like me. How had I become a guest in my own life? I remembered the day I moved into this house. Clifford had only been gone 6 weeks. His clothes still hung in the closet. His slippers sat at the edge of the bed, like he might come home and put them on. My son, James, had offered gently, "You shouldn't be alone in that big house, Mom. Move in with us. You'll be around family. It'll be easier." It sounded like comfort, like a lifeline, and I wanted to believe it. I wanted to believe that I could matter again, that sharing the house, the space, the air would bring us closer. I packed my boxes carefully, wrapped every photo frame in bubble wrap like it mattered. I brought the antique clock Clifford adored, the wool throw we always fought over on cold nights, and enough savings to ease their burden. Or so I thought. I even gave James the inheritance paperwork to file, told him I trusted him to handle the details. It wasn't that I was naive. It was that I believed in my family. I didn't see it at first. It was subtle. At dinners, my daughter-in-law Stephanie would speak over me, correct me. "Nora, I think you're misremembering," she'd say when I brought up old family stories. The first time she canceled my grocery list, I thought it was a mistake. "Oh, we don't need that kind of bread," she said with a smile. "And butter's not great for your cholesterol, is it?" Then came the rearranging. My things shuffled off to the guest room. My recipes discarded. My seat at the table slowly moved from beside my grandson to the farthest edge. I was being exiled without a single word. And all the while, I smiled. I thanked them. I told myself, "You're lucky to be here. Be grateful. Be quiet." But now, as I stared at my scalded lap and listened to their laughter echo down the hall, I realized this wasn't silence. This was erasure. The truth hit like a freight train. I hadn't been invited into a family. I'd been absorbed like an asset, my presence convenient when needed, tolerated when not. I was their charity project, a token old woman in the corner of their perfect life, and they didn't even have the decency to hide it. I turned off the fan and listened to the hum of the house. Stephanie's voice rang out, clear, controlled, a queen in her castle. "Don't forget to take your medicine, Mom," she shouted, not bothering to knock, not even waiting for a response. That was the final straw. Because I'd taken my medicine. For years. Swallowed every bitter pill in silence. And for what? Because being alone is better than being used. The next morning, I woke early. Too early. No reason. No alarm. Just the way older people do when the house is quiet and the heart is louder than sleep. After Clifford died, I didn't pack quickly. Every room in our old house held him. His tools in the garage, still covered in grease. His Sunday slippers by the back door. The worn spot on the couch where he'd always lean back, sip coffee, and call me kiddo, even after my hair had turned gray. I had no intention of leaving that house. But James came by more and more often, checking in. "You shouldn't be alone, Mom. That place is too much for you, and the upkeep, it's just a lot." He was right. And when Stephanie chimed in, all sweet smiles and helpful tones, it sounded like compassion. "You'll have your own room, of course. And Ethan would love to have his grandma around." Ethan, my grandson, just 5 at the time, with a mop of curly hair and a laugh that could melt ice. I had hoped, foolishly, that my presence would matter, that I could teach him stories, bake cookies, maybe even pass on a little of my husband's kindness. But I was wrong. From day one, Stephanie set the tone. The room they gave me was at the back of the house, across from the laundry room. No sunlight in the mornings, no insulation from the noise of washing machines and clanking pipes. When I tried to hang a family photo in the hallway, Stephanie told me it didn't match the aesthetic. When I offered to read Ethan a bedtime story, she told me, "He gets too excited when you're in there." When I made oatmeal for breakfast once, James said, "We're doing smoothies now, it's just healthier." I didn't push, I folded, like I always did, thinking if I just gave it time. If I was easy to live with, they'd let me in. But time passed, and all it did was erase me further. They stopped asking if I wanted to join them for movie night, stopped offering to bring me anything when they went out. They even replaced the floral china Clifford and I had passed down with sleek, modern plates. that looked like display pieces in a showroom. I found our old set in the garage one day, shoved in a plastic tub next to the Christmas lights. I remember sitting on the concrete floor, running my hand over the blue roses on one of the teacups. It still had a faint chip on the handle. Cliff had cracked it once trying to open a jam jar. It hit me then. This house had never welcomed me. Not once. I wasn't family. I was a piece of furniture they didn't know where to put. I thought I moved in to be closer to love, but all I did was walk straight into a house where warmth was conditional. And I was done hoping for something that didn't live here. It was a Thursday morning when I finally left the house for something other than groceries or prescriptions. James had driven off in a rush, late for work again. Stephanie had gone to her bar class, the one she never missed. And Ethan, my sweet boy, was already in the backyard, shouting into a headset while his game character fired cartoon rockets. He barely noticed me as I passed by. I needed air. Real air. Not the recycled kind from a vent. So I walked to the park. Slowly. The cane helped, but my knees were still unforgiving. I used to walk faster than Clifford on his best days. Now, each step reminded me that time takes everything, bit by bit, until even walking to a park becomes an act of defiance. It was cool out, the kind of spring morning where the breeze smells like dirt and rebirth. I sat on a bench near the pond. Ducks floated quietly. Everything felt slower there. Simpler, until Ethan ran by. So fast, so loud, nearly knocking over a toddler. He was chasing a soccer ball he didn't bring. The little girl burst into tears as he snatched it, laughing like it was the funniest thing on earth. "Ethan," I called firmly, "give that back." He looked at me, right through me, and shouted, "Why don't you go nap or something?" The mother of the toddler turned to glare at me, assuming I was his mother. The humiliation bloomed hot under my skin. I tried to rise from the bench, only halfway, and that's when I stumbled. My cane caught the edge of a crack in the walkway. I didn't fall, but I might as well have. My pride cracked instead. "Excuse me," a voice said beside me, warm and low. "Are you all right?" She was around my age, maybe a little younger. Wavy, gray-streaked hair pulled into a loose braid. Sensible sneakers. Kind eyes. She offered her hand, and I took it without a second thought. "I'm fine," I lied, brushing the dirt from my coat. "Just a clumsy moment." I saw what happened. "Your grandson?" she asked gently. I nodded. Shame flooded me. "Yes." She didn't scold me or tell me boys will be boys. She said, "No one should be spoken to like that." That stopped me cold, because she didn't say no grandmother should be spoken to like that. She said no one. "Rita," she said, holding out her hand again. "I'm usually here around this time. If you ever want company." I hesitated, then gave her my name, the one I hadn't said out loud to someone new in what felt like years. "Nora." We sat, we talked, not for long, just enough. She asked about books. I mentioned gardening. She said she liked orchids, even though she always overwatered them. And as we laughed, really laughed, I felt something strange, like I had just been seen for the first time in ages. Before we parted, she scribbled her number on a receipt from her bag, in case you ever need a ride, or just someone to vent to. I took it. Didn't promise I'd call, but I folded it carefully, like something precious, because in that small, quiet moment, between cane stumbles and careless insults, someone reminded me I was not just furniture in someone else's house. I was still a person. And I wasn't done yet. That night, I sat at my desk with an old notebook. The leather cover had softened with age, and the corners curled slightly, like it had been waiting for me. I hadn't journaled since before Clifford got sick. There never seemed to be a point. Every day back then was a cycle of caretaking and endurance. And after his death, I just stopped recording anything. Like my life had become too dull to bother remembering. But something about Rita's words, it got under my skin. Not in a bad way. In a way that made me itch for something honest. something mine. So I opened to a blank page and wrote the date. Then, today I was told to nap and be quiet by a child I used to carry in my arms. No one corrected him. I paused. The pen hovered. Then I kept going. Stephanie didn't even glance up when I came home. James asked me if I could fold the laundry while I was resting anyway. That was the part that really stuck in my throat. The way he said resting, like everything I did or didn't do, was just another form of being useless. Page after page I wrote, not long rants, just notes, snippets, names, times, moments where I was erased, reworded, minimized. When I offered to help plan Ethan's birthday last year, and Stephanie said, "Don't worry, we've got it handled." When I told a story from my nursing days, and James said, "Mom, that was forever ago. Times have changed." When I made beef stew, and Stephanie sniffed, "It's kind of greasy, don't you think? I'll make a quinoa bowl instead." Even the small things, how they never saved me a seat at the front of the car, how they always assumed I wanted decaf, how my coat mysteriously disappeared from the front closet and ended up in a box marked donate. It wasn't abuse, it wasn't even anger. It was something colder. Erasure. They were deleting me one choice at a time. And what scared me wasn't just that they were doing it. It was that I had let them. Because it was easier than speaking up and being told I was imagining it. That I was overreacting. That maybe my memory really was going. That lie, that slow, deliberate whisper that I was losing my mind, had started creeping in when Stephanie would misquote me. "You said you didn't want to come. You said you were too tired. You already told us that story, Nora." I wasn't confused. I was being manipulated. By someone who wanted me to question myself just enough to step aside. By someone who smiled too big when she told people, "Nora's not as sharp as she used to be. Bless her heart." Stephanie was charming, especially to people who didn't know her well, but I'd seen the curl in her lip when I tried to join in. The way her eyes scanned me like I was a chore she hadn't checked off. She wanted my presence to seem like a kindness they were offering. When it had been my money that paid off the second floor they turned into an office for her remote law work. I stopped writing and looked down at my notebook. My hands were trembling. I was documenting my own quiet disappearance, but not anymore. I flipped the page. At the top, I wrote, "Keep this, keep everything." Because next time someone told me I was misremembering, I'd have receipts, literal ones. And maybe this time, when the final straw came, I wouldn't second-guess the truth. It was Sunday, the kind of day Clifford used to call slow time. A day for stews that took all afternoon, vinyl crackling on the old player, and the house smelling like onions, thyme, and love. I had gotten up early, notebook still sitting on my nightstand like a silent witness, and I thought, today might be the day I reclaim just one small thing. My grandmother's chicken and dumplings, the one meal everyone used to beg me to make during holidays, birthdays, cold days, hard days, back when I mattered. I made my way to the kitchen while the house was still mostly asleep. Ethan was scrolling something on his tablet in the living room. James was outside, fiddling with the hose that had a leak he never fixed. Stephanie wasn't up yet. Perfect! I chopped celery slow, the way Granny taught me. Let the butter melt fully before adding onions. I could hear her voice in my ear. "You don't rush love. You simmer it." The smell filled the house. That rich, warm scent of comfort. I saw Ethan peek his head in. He sniffed the air, curious. Then came Stephanie. She walked in like she owned the floor, the air, the sound of her own chewing gum. She didn't speak at first, just stood near the fridge, arms crossed, watching the pot like it was smoking something illegal. Finally, "What are you making?" I smiled, gentle. "Chicken and dumplings. Thought it might be nice for dinner." Stephanie wrinkled her nose. "That's kind of heavy, don't you think? Nobody eats those greasy things anymore." I kept stirring. "It's a family recipe. Ethan always liked it. I'm trying to keep us on healthier meals," she said. walking over and clicking the stove off without asking. Just like that. Like my cooking was a fire hazard. My hands clenched around the spoon. I didn't say anything. Not yet. Just reached over and turned the burner back on, low. She stared at me like I'd slapped her. I wasn't finished, I said, calm as still water. You don't have to cook, she replied, all sugar and ice. It's not your responsibility. We've got meal plans for the week. That's what she said. What I heard was, you're not needed. Your food, your memories, your culture, they don't belong here anymore. I looked at the pot, still bubbling faintly, holding pieces of my grandmother, my mother, myself, and I felt something break. Not loudly, not like glass, soft, like fabric tearing at the seam. Right, I said, turning the burner off myself. I'll save it for myself. She didn't reply. Just walked out, flipping her ponytail like I wasn't there. I ladled the stew into a container, put it in the back of the fridge where she never looked. Then I stood at the sink and washed the pot slowly, staring out the window at nothing. Later that night, I watched as she served roasted salmon with a sweet potato mash, something from a food blog she followed religiously. Ethan picked at it, barely ate. I didn't say a word. They weren't just removing my things, they were removing me. The next morning, I locked my bedroom door for the first time in months. It was a small sound, the click of a bolt sliding into place, but it echoed like thunder in my chest. I'd never locked them out before. Not even after the soup incident. Not even after the care home jokes started creeping in like mold around the edges of their voices. But today, I needed space. Not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, strategically. I opened my closet and pulled down a shoebox wrapped in an old cardigan. Inside were papers. Real ones. Original deed copies. Bank statements. The document where Clifford had named me sole beneficiary and executor before he passed. And then, folded, worn at the creases, the paperwork James had asked me to sign 2 years ago. He'd smiled so sweetly, too. It's just to streamline things, Mom. You know, for when the time comes. That way we don't have to go through probate. You'll still be safe, of course. Safe. What a strange word to use. At the time, I trusted him. Trusted the boy I raised. The one who used to cry into my neck when he scraped his knees. But I didn't read every line. Not closely. I had just lost Clifford. I would have signed anything to make the silence feel less permanent. Now, I studied every clause, every initial, and my stomach turned. He hadn't taken full ownership yet, but the document gave him partial control over the house, over decisions, over me. He'd buried it under language like fiduciary responsibility and succession designation, words that sounded caring, but weren't. Words that meant, you don't get the final say anymore, not unless I did something about it. I reached for the phone. The one they didn't know I kept in the back of my drawer, separate from the house line. A gift Clifford had insisted on before his last hospital stay. Every woman needs one number no one else has, he'd said, in case she ever needs to disappear or fight her way back. I called it. Mark Hastings, a warm voice answered. Retired attorney. How can I help? Mark, I said, steady. It's Nora Hayes, Clifford's wife. A pause. Then recognition. Nora? My God. I haven't heard that name in years. How are you, dear? I told him. Not all of it, but enough. He didn't interrupt, just listened. And then he said words I hadn't heard in months. You were smart to call. Let's get your power of attorney revoked. And while we're at it, let's talk about updating your will. Tears welled up in my eyes before I could stop them. Not from sadness, but from the sudden clarity of being seen, believed, protected. That evening, I ate in my room. Cold chicken and dumplings. Better than any quinoa bowl. James knocked lightly at one point. Mom, Stephanie says you've been distant. Everything okay? Just tired, I said through the door. I think I'll start going to bed earlier. He hesitated. All right. Let us know if you need anything." I didn't answer, just waited until his footsteps faded. Then I sat down at my desk and opened the notebook again. "Locked the door today. Called Mark. Power of attorney ends next week. Will being revised. I'm not asking for space anymore. I'm taking it." I added one more thing at the bottom of the page. Rita's number. Because sometimes the people who see you best aren't the ones you raised, but the ones who arrive just when you start remembering who you are. And I was remembering. Piece by quiet piece. They thought I was folding, but I was writing the blueprint. The marker smell hit me before I even opened the door. Thick and artificial. Like the kind used on those giant school posters, except this wasn't paper. It was my bedroom wall. I stepped in and stared at it, frozen. Bright red scribbles covered the space above my headboard. Shapes, slashes, and an awkward attempt at a face with jagged teeth. My name, Nora, was scrawled 3 times in crooked, uneven handwriting. I already knew who did it. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I just stood there, clutching the tray of tea I'd brought in with me. My hands didn't even shake. Maybe they were too used to this now, being blamed for the mess someone else made. Stephanie came in just minutes later, Ethan at her side. The second she saw the wall, she gasped like she was the one injured. "Oh my God, what happened?" I raised one brow. "I was hoping you could tell me." Ethan looked down, twiddling his fingers. Not even a decent act of remorse. He knew exactly what he'd done. Stephanie turned to him with a tight smile, that performative tone that only came out when she needed to sound like a parent. "Sweetie, did you do this?" Ethan shrugged. "Grandma told me to draw something on her wall." I didn't even blink. The lie was so bold it was almost laughable. "Excuse me?" I said, voice even. Calm. Dangerous. "She said I could," Ethan mumbled. Stephanie stared at me like she was waiting for an apology. That's when James came in. "What's going on?" And Ethan repeated it. "Grandma said it was okay." The room fell silent. Stephanie sighed dramatically. "Nora, I don't know what to say." James frowned. "Mom, are you feeling okay?" "That's not like you." I set the tray down carefully, straightened up, and looked my son in the eyes. "Are you asking if I told an 8-year-old to vandalize my wall?" "I'm just saying. Things have been a little off lately," he replied, carefully, like someone walking across thin ice. And there it was, the seed they'd been watering for months. That soft suggestion that my mind was slipping, that I was confused, fragile, forgetful. It was a setup. And now the child they failed to discipline had learned to weaponize it too. "Maybe," Stephanie added, "it's time we talk about something more supportive, like a care facility. Just somewhere with structure." I almost laughed, but the anger rose too quickly to leave room for humor. "No," I said, clear as crystal. "What we're going to talk about is accountability. Your son is not being raised. He's being enabled. You all think it's harmless, but it's not." James raised his hands like a hostage negotiator. "Mom, let's just take it easy." "No," I said again, louder this time. "You brought me here. You promised family, support. And now I'm being gaslit in my own room." Stephanie's jaw clenched. "That's not fair." I stepped closer. "Neither is being blamed for a lie your child told, while you all stood by and let him become cruel." I turned to James, softening, just a fraction. "You want to believe I said it? Fine. But ask yourself, when's the last time I even had a voice in this house?" They didn't answer. They didn't have to. I turned and walked past them, out into the hallway, the scent of dry erase marker still clinging to my sweater like proof of war. Back in my room, I locked the door again. Sat down. Wrote it all down. Today I was accused of encouraging a child to destroy my own wall. Stephanie suggested a care facility. James didn't defend me. Ethan lied without hesitation. Then, beneath it, I wrote, "Let them keep testing me. I'm not done making moves." The next morning, I didn't bring up the wall. I didn't mention the conversation about a care home, or Ethan's lie, or the look James gave me like I was already halfway gone. Instead, I smiled. I came to breakfast with my cardigan buttoned and my hair brushed neatly behind my ears. I poured coffee, regular, not decaf, and sipped it slowly while Stephanie ran down the list of Ethan's after-school activities like I wasn't even at the table. I nodded at all the right moments, smiled when Ethan looked at me with that smug little glint in his eyes. I even complimented Stephanie's omelet, though the egg was rubbery and the spinach undercooked. Let them think I was fading. Let them think I was done resisting. Because I wasn't going to argue with people who'd already made up their minds. I had better things to do. After breakfast, I went back to my room and quietly canceled my doctor's appointment. I didn't need a checkup. I needed time. Time away from medical evaluations they might twist into paperwork that proved what they wanted to believe. If they wanted to send me away, they'd need more than one tantrum from a child and a few misquoted stories. They'd need a case. And I wasn't about to hand it to them. Instead, I packed my old photo albums into a suitcase, tucked the original property deed. Yes, the real one, between two dresses. Everything they thought they had control over. It was moving back into my possession. I called Mark again. He confirmed the revocation paperwork would be ready by Friday. Once you sign, they'll no longer have authority over financial or health decisions, he said. We're locking it down, Nora. Every last crack. I almost cried. Instead, I laughed. Quietly. Bitterly. Because I'd given them so many chances. I'd given them meals, money, memories, and they gave me erasure. That night, I played along again. Let them remind me twice about where the olive oil was. Smiled when Stephanie corrected the way I folded the towels. Even chuckled when Ethan left his dirty socks on my bed. Again, I watched them treat me like glass. Like I'd crack or forget if they pushed too hard. Good. Let them. I was already half gone, but not the way they thought. I was moving in silence, pulling pieces of myself back from the edge of their grasp. Each quiet yes was a nail in the coffin they were building for their own control. I wrote it all down. Canceled appointment. Packed albums, deed, documents. They don't know how dangerous I am when I'm quiet. Then, on a separate page, checklist, revoke power of attorney, secure original deed, cancel doctor, visit move funds into personal protected account. Finalize, new will find temporary flat pack essentials exit. Quietly, Stephanie was too busy managing Ethan's schedule and her online clients to notice my suitcases shifting. James was too absorbed in his work to question why I'd started using my own bank card again. And Ethan? He didn't care. They weren't watching me. They thought I was fading. They forgot I used to run emergency rooms during the night shift, manage 30 staff, calm grieving families, pronounce time of death without blinking. They forgot I was a widow who'd rebuilt her life with a half-empty fridge and a full mortgage. They forgot that the quieter a woman gets, the more dangerous she becomes. And now? I was smiling for their comfort, while planning for my freedom. By Thursday, the house felt colder, not in temperature, but in spirit. Stephanie barely spoke to me, and when she did, it was with that patronizing, tight-lipped smile that said, "I know what's best for you, even if you don't." James was busy at work every night, though the glow of his phone betrayed him on the couch until midnight. Ethan had moved on from vandalizing my wall to ignoring me completely. No apologies, no acknowledgement, but I didn't care. Because I had something they didn't know about. Rita. We met again at the park, this time by accident, though I think something in me had hoped she'd be there. I sat on our same bench, cane hooked over my arm, notebook zipped away in my purse, and just like before, she appeared like comfort in sneakers. "You again," she smiled. "Guilty," I said, then softened. "You're not just a kind stranger anymore." She sat beside me, leaned back, and looked at the sky. "Some people aren't strangers. You just haven't met them yet." That made me quiet for a moment. No one had spoken to me like that in a long time, like I was still here. She didn't pry, but something about her presence made me start talking. I told her about the wall, the accusations, the canceled meal, the locked door, the notebook full of dismissed truths. I didn't expect her to believe all of it, or even understand, but she did. When I finished, she just nodded. "You're not crazy. You're being erased." And hearing someone say it, not as an insult, not as a gaslight, but as a confirmation, it unraveled something tight in my chest. "I'm leaving," I said aloud for the first time. "Not today, but soon." She turned to me. "Do you have somewhere to go?" I hesitated. "Not yet. I've been figuring things out." "Well, I know a place," she said, matter of fact. "My building's next to a little retirement complex, small flats, quiet. Not fancy, but decent. Right across from a community center with book clubs, painting classes, even a walking group if your knees allow it." I looked at her, half laughing. "You've really thought this through, haven't you?" She smiled. "Let's just say I've helped a few women before. Some leave husbands, some leave children, some just leave silence." I blinked. "Why do you care?" "Because I've been the woman who stayed too long," she said, "and I've been the woman who walked." The second one breathes easier. That night, we exchanged more than numbers. We exchanged hope. Rita offered to take me by the complex the following week, said she'd talk to the manager, even offered to help with the deposit if money got tight. I told her I couldn't accept that, but she shrugged. "You can. You just don't want to owe anyone. I get that, but this isn't debt. It's dignity." I wrote it all down when I got home. Rita, park, complex, community center, dignity. First offer of real help since Clifford died. Then I opened my drawer, took out the banking info, and made the call to begin separating funds into a private account under my name only. No joint access. No permissions. No more shadows over my money. I ordered a burner phone with prepaid minutes. I withdrew half my cash savings in increments so they wouldn't notice. $200 here. $300 there. Quiet steps. Stephanie was too busy correcting Ethan's grammar. James was too busy avoiding eye contact. They didn't see me re-emerging. They didn't notice that I'd started packing slowly. First my clothes, then my heirlooms, wrapped in dish towels. I wasn't running away. I was walking toward something. A place where no one turned off my stove, or questioned my mind, or erased my meals. It was a Saturday morning when it happened, the moment I stopped feeling sorry and started seeing things exactly as they were, the kind of moment that doesn't scream. It just stings. I was in the living room knitting, the sunlight catching the yarn in soft strands like spider silk. A little peace, finally. Just me, the soft clack of needles, and a pattern Clifford's mother once taught me when we were still more family than strangers. Then Ethan stormed in with a juice box. Not walking. Charging. He flopped onto the armchair next to mine with all the grace of a bowling ball, elbow out, voice loud. "I'm bored." I didn't even have time to answer before his hand swung out and knocked the juice clean from the armrest. Right onto my knitting. Bright orange liquid spread across the soft wool. The piece I'd been working on for weeks. Stained. Ruined. Still dripping. I froze. He laughed. A short, ugly burst. "Oops." I looked at him. Really looked. His eyes didn't show guilt. Or regret. Only that gleam again. The one I'd seen too many times now. The look of a boy who knew he'd never be held accountable. I waited. Waited for Stephanie to come in and scold him. Waited for James to apologize on his behalf. Waited for someone to see me. But no one did. When Stephanie finally walked by, 10 minutes later, she saw the juice on the floor and the wet yarn in my lap and said only, "You should be more careful with drinks near your projects." I didn't answer, didn't flinch, didn't look up, because something in me had snapped so cleanly it didn't even bleed. They weren't going to change. Ethan would keep laughing. Stephanie would keep blaming. James would keep standing off to the side with his hands in his pockets and his eyes on the floor. And I would keep shrinking if I stayed. So I smiled. Not at anyone. Just to myself. That quiet, knowing smile women wear when we finally stop asking for what no one plans to give. Later that night, I opened the journal and wrote, Ethan spilled juice on my knitting, laughed. Stephanie blamed me. James said nothing. I smiled. Because I finally know. I'm not the problem. They are. Then I opened my dresser drawer and began separating what mattered from what didn't. Old photo albums. Yes. Wedding ring? No. Recipes written in Granny's shaky hand? Absolutely. The silk scarf James bought me 2 Mother's Days ago and never asked about again? No. Let Stephanie keep that. It matched her insincerity. I added a new task to my list. Don't look back. I called Rita that night. I'm ready, I said. She didn't ask. Are you sure? She just said, then let's get moving. The next day, we visited the retirement flats. Not flashy, not spacious, but warm. The kind of place where people say good morning and actually mean it. Where no one locks your opinions out of the room. I'll take it, I said before we even sat down in the manager's office. And just like that, I had a new address. One they didn't know, one they didn't control. And as we left, Rita looked over and said, You've still got that fight in you. I waited until the house was quiet. James had taken Ethan to soccer practice. Stephanie was out at her weekly facial appointment, the same one she justified as mental health maintenance. I had exactly 2 hours. I opened my bedside drawer, pulled out the folder with every legal revision Mark had walked me through. Revoked power of attorney. Confirmed new will. Protective trust formation for the remainder of my savings. And one more thing, something that made my hands tremble slightly even now. A form to remove James's name from the joint account I had foolishly opened after Clifford's death. The account they used to claim I was secure, the same one Stephanie had used to order $300 throw pillows last spring and then called it Home Improvement. I took a deep breath and logged into the bank app. My own name, my own password, one they never thought I'd remember how to use. I transferred every remaining cent, $12,842, into the protected individual account I'd opened with Rita's help. Then I made the final call. Yes, I'd like to remove a secondary user from this account, James Hayes. Yes, I have full authority. I had to spell my name 3 times, confirm my birth date twice, and answer security questions Clifford had once laughed over as silly backup plans. But 23 minutes later, it was done. The joint account no longer existed, only mine. By the time they noticed, it would be too late, and I'd be too far gone. I turned off the light on my nightstand, sat down and wrote, transferred funds, removed James, no longer financially tethered to the people who treat me like a burden. Then I wrote, I bought the groceries last week. Stephanie used my card. I never saw the receipt. And another entry, James borrowed $500 for, quote, house maintenance and never returned it. Because it wasn't just about power of attorney, it was about patterns. They didn't just exclude me, they drained me. Little by little. Smiles and silence. Favors without repayment. Guilt dressed up as love. And I had mistaken it all for family. Later that afternoon, James returned with Ethan. I sat at the dining table sipping tea. He came in smiling, too wide. Hey, Mom. Got the fence estimate. Might need to dip into the account next week. Just FYI. I didn't blink. Oh? I said. He walked right past me, already opening his phone. Yeah, like $2,100. But the guy says it's necessary. Termites or something. I let him finish. Let him pull up the banking app, expecting the shared numbers. Then I watched his face go pale. Mom? Did you move the funds? I looked up slowly. I secured what's mine, I said, calmly. That account's been closed. He laughed, but it was thin. Nervous. Closed? Why would you do that without talking to me first? I held my tea steady. Why did you open a new credit card in my name without talking to me first? His mouth opened, then shut. That was just for emergencies. No, I interrupted. That was theft. Stephanie walked in just in time to catch the end of the conversation. Her lips tightened. But she didn't speak. I stood, walked past them, and said as I passed, "I'll be gone by next week. I suggest you cancel your fence plans." I didn't slam the door, didn't raise my voice. But the floor creaked behind me as James stood frozen, the lie stuck somewhere between his throat and his pride. That night, I folded my knit blanket, the one Ethan hadn't ruined, and packed it gently with my clothes. Then I zipped the suitcase closed and wrote, "They drained me for years. But today," I unplugged the cord. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was worried, but because for the first time in years I felt awake. My mind buzzed with what-ifs, but not the kind that come from fear. These were possibilities, questions about how soft the new sheets might be, whether my new neighbors would say hello, if I'd join Rita's walking group, or just sit in the sun with my knitting and finally let the yarn tell its own story, uninterrupted. I waited until Sunday morning to do the final thing, the thing I'd been writing in pieces in my head for weeks. I pulled a clean piece of stationery from my notebook, the thick kind with a subtle floral border, and I wrote, "To James, Stephanie, and Ethan, thank you for everything. And I mean that sincerely. Thank you for showing me where I truly stand in this house, for the lessons in silence, for reminding me what it feels like to be invisible and what it takes to rise from it. Thank you for teaching me what love isn't. This home no longer feels like one, so I'll no longer take up space you'd prefer left empty. As of this week, I am leaving, not with anger, not in bitterness, but with clarity. I have legally secured my finances, revoked all prior permissions, and updated all documentation. I no longer require your management. I no longer accept your permission. You may keep the broken knitting needles, the erased recipes, and the story you've created in your heads about the frail old woman who can't quite keep up. I'm taking everything else, especially my peace. Please do not try to find me. Not because I'm hiding, but because I finally understand that I owe no one an explanation for protecting myself. Ethan, one day, if you ever learn what it means to apologize and mean it, maybe we'll speak again, or maybe not. That choice will be yours, but only if it comes with accountability. As for you, Stephanie, I hope motherhood teaches you compassion before time teaches you regret. James, my sweet boy, the hardest goodbye. You were raised by a woman who gave her all and asked for very little. You've become someone I don't recognize. That's not easy to say, but it's easier than staying silent in a house where my absence would be more noticed than my presence. I will not be your burden anymore. I will not be your quiet scapegoat. And I will not be your backup plan. This is not an invitation for contact. It is a notice of departure and a declaration of freedom. Nora, I folded it neatly, slipped it into an envelope, wrote their names on the front in blue ink, just like I used to write James's name on his elementary lunch notes. I placed it on the kitchen table, next to the fruit bowl Stephanie always filled with fake apples and real indifference. Then, before the sun could rise too high or regret could creep in, I wheeled my suitcase through the front door. The air was cool, the morning sky just starting to pinken. Rita's car was already waiting. She stepped out, smiling. "You're ready?" I nodded, more than I ever was to move in. As we pulled away, I didn't look back. Not at the house. Not at the door that had stayed closed to me in more ways than one. I only looked forward. Because this time, the leaving wasn't the tragedy. It was the beginning. It took exactly 19 days before James came knocking. Rita was at work. I had just poured myself tea, real milk, not almond, when the buzzer buzzed 3 times in quick succession. I didn't need to ask who it was. I walked to the window, peered down, and there he stood, my son, jaw tight, eyes scanning the building like he had every right to be here, like I was still someone he could fetch. I could have ignored him, but I didn't, because I wasn't hiding. I pressed the intercom. "Yes, Mom," his voice cracked slightly. "It's me, James. I know who you are," I said calmly. "What do you want? Please, I need to talk to you." I took a long breath. then buzzed him in. He climbed the stairs too fast, like urgency could erase years of silence. When I opened the door, I didn't invite him in. He noticed. I saw it in the way he hesitated on the threshold. "Nice place," he said, eyes flicking past me. Smaller than the house. Smaller, but mine. He looked like he hadn't slept much. He wore guilt the way some people wear expensive coats, ill-fitting and too late for the weather. "I read the letter," he began. I nodded. "I figured." I didn't realize how bad it had gotten. "No," I said. "You chose not to see how bad it had gotten." He winced. "I never meant for you to feel—" "Unloved?" I interrupted. "Unseen? Betrayed in the very house I paid off, while you and your wife made decisions around me like I was just another lamp in the corner?" His mouth opened, then closed. I stepped out, shutting the door softly behind me. "What exactly are you here for, James?" He pulled a folded paper from his coat. "There's an issue. With the house." "Of course there is." "The title change," he continued, voice tighter. "The inheritance documents you changed. They removed my access. I didn't know you had the authority." "I had every authority," I said, stepping closer. "And I used it." He blinked. "But we were counting on my money." "Yes, I know." He looked away. "You didn't come here because you missed me," I said. "You came because the assets are gone." "That's not fair." "Neither is gaslighting your own mother into doubting her memory. Neither is letting your wife humiliate me at that dinner table. Neither is watching your son lie and vandalize and never once asking why I was locking my door." He rubbed his face, finally letting the mask slip. "We thought you'd lost your grip on things." "No," I said. "You just didn't like that I hadn't lost my will." He didn't speak for a long time, just stood there. The man I once raised. The boy who used to hold my hand crossing the street now looking at me like I was the stranger. "You've changed," he finally said. I tilted my head. "No. I just stopped shrinking." Silence again. "Can we fix this?" "No," I said. "But I'm your son." "And I'm your mother," I answered. "But you loved my usefulness more than me. Now that it's gone, so is your interest." I pulled my phone from my pocket, hit record. He noticed. "What are you doing?" "Protecting myself. You don't get to spin this later. This is who you are." His face flushed. "You're being cruel." "No, I'm being clear." I ended the recording and added calmly, "I'm updating my emergency contact. It won't be you. It's Rita now." He stood there, stunned, as if the mention of a new name, of someone who earned my trust, wounded him deeper than any insult. And maybe it did, because for the first time, I chose who gets access to me. And it wasn't him. I turned the handle behind me. "Goodbye, James." "Mom, wait." "No." And then I closed the door. Not out of anger, but out of finality. It took only 3 hours for the phone call to come. Not from James, but from Stephanie. Her number lit up the screen like a final warning bell. I didn't answer. She tried again, and again, then a voicemail. When I finally listened, it was all breathy indignation and barely veiled threats wrapped in faux concern. "We're just really worried about you, Nora. It's not normal to make decisions like this without discussing it as a family. I don't know what outside influence you're under, but James is heartbroken. And Ethan misses you, even if you think he doesn't. We need to talk about this, before things get out of hand." I didn't reply, but I transcribed it into my journal. Word for word. "Outside influence equals Rita translation. You're thinking for yourself now, and that scares us." That night, I got an email from Mark, subject line, "All secure." The house title was finalized under my name again, fully. No more shared transfer clauses, no vague language. The trust was airtight. My healthcare proxy updated. Emergency contact changed. Every thread of control they once wrapped around me, snipped. They were falling apart. Not because I'd left, but because I left with nothing they could reclaim. And they were still trying to spin the story. 2 days later, Rita and I went to a small cafe by the pier. It was sunny, windy, and smelled like cinnamon and salt. We laughed about something simple, how I never understood Rita's obsession with crosswords. And that's when my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Stephanie's number, but not her voice. It was Ethan. His tiny voice, all practiced softness. "Grandma? I'm sorry." I felt it, that tight twist in my gut. The little voice that had always whispered, "Give them one more chance. He's just a child." But then came the script. Too perfect. Too adult. "I just miss you, and I don't know why you don't want to live with us anymore. We're really confused. Maybe you can come visit and help me with homework? Mommy said that might make you feel helpful again." Feel helpful again. Not missed. Not loved. Just useful. I hung up without a word, because I knew what this was. A performance. And I'd watched enough of their little plays to know when a child becomes the prop for guilt. I blocked the number. Didn't cry. I'd already done all the mourning months ago. In silence, with stained knitting and locked doors and ignored recipes. Now, I was done. That night, I called Mark. "I want to make sure everything's watertight," I said. "If they try anything, media slander, fake guardianship petitions, retroactive challenges, I want to be ready." He chuckled. "Nora, you are 10 steps ahead of every trick in the book. But yes, we'll draft an affidavit, statement of competency, dated and signed." I paused. "Include the journal entries. You want to use those?" I smiled. "They're not just my memories now. They're evidence." And they were. Every line I wrote while they erased me was now a weapon they'd never see coming. Let them try. Let them whimper and gasp and call it a misunderstanding. Because I had the receipts. I wrote one last note that night. Stephanie used Ethan as a guilt tool. I didn't bend. Mark says they'll try harder. Let them. I didn't walk away with nothing. I walked away with myself. And that is everything. It didn't take long for the house I'd left to start cracking from the inside. Rita called it the void effect. When people lose their scapegoat, she said over tea one morning, they have to turn on each other. Someone's got to hold the blame bag. I didn't have to wonder if it was true. The proof came pouring in. It started when Mark forwarded me an email, James's attempt to access part of the trust I'd built under Clifford's name. He cited unresolved financial contributions to home maintenance. Mark replied, copy-pasting the property records showing I'd paid for the roof repair he referenced in full. Next came a social media post from one of Stephanie's acquaintances, a vague paragraph about betrayal by an ungrateful parent that was so obviously about me, it practically had my name in the hashtags. She made sure to make it public, made sure it looked polished, polite, just ambiguous enough to draw sympathy from people who didn't know better. I didn't comment. I didn't react. I printed it, added it to my folder. Then came the real blow, a voicemail from James. His voice was tight, panicked, not angry this time, desperate. "Mom, Stephanie's talking about selling the house. She says if we can't get control of the trust again, it's not worth staying. I don't know what she's planning. She's angry all the time. Ethan's acting out at school. Can we talk? Just me and you?" I replayed it once, not because I missed his voice, because I needed to hear the part where he said, "Just me and you," as if he'd forgotten that every choice he made had Stephanie's signature all over it. As if he hadn't watched his son spill juice on my knitting and laughed. As if he hadn't watched his wife twist my memories and said nothing. Over. And over. I saved the voicemail. Then I blocked the number. Rita came over that evening with lemon cookies and 2 bottles of sparkling water. "How are the vultures?" she asked with a smirk. "Eating each other," I said, smiling back. Turns out I wasn't the problem. I was the glue. She raised her glass. To being unstuck. We clinked bottles like women who had nothing left to prove. That night I journaled with a kind of calm I hadn't felt in years. James wants to talk. Stephanie's unraveling. Ethan's struggling. The center cannot hold. Because the woman they leaned on without kindness finally walked away. Let them implode. I am not their foundation anymore. And then I did something I hadn't done in decades. I pulled out the old stereo I'd brought with me, plugged it in, dusted it off, found the CD Clifford, and I used to dance to when dinner was done and dishes were still wet. I pressed play, let the sound wrap around me, warm, slow, familiar. I closed my eyes, and in my tiny kitchen, no granite countertops, no stainless steel, no curated decor, I danced, barefoot, alone, free. I wasn't anyone's dependent. I wasn't someone's obligation. I wasn't a sad, aging figure in a guest room turned storage closet. I was Nora, the woman who used to run night shifts, manage death, deliver babies, soothe strangers. The woman who carried a family and finally put it down. That night, I slept with the window open, let the wind in, let the silence stay. Because they could scream, they could sob, they could twist my name into any shape they liked. But I had already disappeared from their house and their narrative. What remained was a woman who no longer answered when called by guilt,